morning, good evening, good night, wherever or whoever you may be. I am Alan Arante, and this is the Recluse podcast. Today's guest is Rob Harrold. He is a photographer based in Portland, Oregon. His subjects include animals, the environment, architecture, people, nightscapes, and other things. He can be found on Instagram at remaining.light, and you can get a quote for a photography session at remaininglight.photography. In this conversation, Rob and I talk about his time in China and the different customs he experienced. We talk about the insecurity that can come with being a photographer and being a creator. We talk about the emotional work that sometimes goes into shooting a portrait for a timid person. Rob Harrold has recently delved into photojournalism. He has gone downtown in Portland to capture the protests, and we talk about what he's seen. He has seen the Wall of Moms, the graffiti on government buildings, and the federal agents. In particular, we talk about a specific photo he took. It seems to be an inadvertent portrait of a federal agent looking directly into the camera. The person seems to be visibly anxious and perhaps scared. Rob, I thank you for your time and the use of your skills during this time of social conflict. I believe it is important work. So without further delay, this is a portrait of Rob Harrold. When you were in China, were there any experiences you had where, like, I'm just going to make something up, where you hold the door for somebody and that's not their custom there? Did you have any experiences like that where the cultures sort of clashed?
The first thing that comes to mind is kind of weird but funny is I don't know, I was raised here in America that when you finish, you clean your plate when you're eating a meal. Over there culturally that means that you want more food. So I stuffed myself so many times because I would be staying at Airbnbs and the host would be cooking us meals and I kept, eating all of it and they kept bringing me more food and I didn't want to be rude and I just kept eating it and it's like ended up making myself sick out of not wanting to be rude for that.
So you mean
that was that.
So you mean that you were finishing the whole plate rather than leaving a little bit because you were full? You would finish the whole plate out of politeness.
Right. Yeah. Thinking that would show that I enjoyed the meal, but that just over there, it means you're ready for some more. It was a little different. Yeah.
So did you learn that just implicitly? Somebody didn't tell you like, hey man, you should leave a little bit. You kind of had to find that out on your own.
Yeah. Well, my buddy kind of showed me a little bit of the ropes. Like he had lived over there for a while. But, the other stuff like tipping is seen as kind of disrespectful over there, too.
Did you ever tip while you were out there?
So a lot of like cab drivers and stuff, they know that I'm American and they know they can get a little, some extra bucks out of me. So, but mostly people see it as like a disrespectful thing of you like demonstrating that you're wealthier than them. Kind of that's how it's seen over there.
So you've been international. It sounds like you've traveled across the states. What do you think? I mean, this is probably an obvious answer, but what's the benefit to you to traveling? What's the difference between you who has been to a few places compared to somebody who stays in their state and doesn't go anywhere?
Just definitely getting out of your bubble. It's, even just Portland, it's a little liberal bubble here, and you kind of forget about that. Most of the state is pretty conservative and red, but even the U.S. is a pretty big country, and it's culturally, from end to end, is very diverse, and it's good to experience how other people are living life. Gives you perspective on things, and kind of lets you empathize with how other people think rather than, I don't know, just judging them without knowing how, their backgrounds.
Yeah. You said you went to Mexico as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've been many times.
What are the circumstances of those trips?
Most recent one was a wedding. Again, it was, we went New Year's last year. Went down to Puerto Vallarta. So,
Wow.
yeah.
How was that?
That was great. We had, as a bunch of friends went down and we rented a yacht and, yeah, had the wedding ceremony like at midnight with the fireworks going off and everything. It was beautiful.
Wow, that's insane. That's like like a Disney movie plot or something.
Yeah, yeah, it
Uh,
was great.
so, do you think you'll? Obviously, you can't tell the future. Do you think you'll die in Portland? Is that how connected you feel to that city?
Um, I really love it here. Like I have, a good job. I like where I live. I've always had a trend in my life of wanting to shake things up.
Hmm.
So I wouldn't, with 100% certainty say I'll stay here. But right now I'm pretty content. Yeah.
Did you go to college?
So yeah, I went to college for something completely different than what I'm doing now. I actually went 4 years for automotive engineering.
Oh wow.
So that was back in Michigan, and kind of realized I didn't want to do anything with that. So, um, yeah, changed majors and did 2 years of exercise science, which is kind of like a physical therapy degree.
And when you say automotive engineering, do you mean like becoming a mechanic or like something more specialized than that?
So I got my associate's degree in, yeah, it was kind of a mechanic degree, but I was going on to get engineering. I was going to go into kind of testing and design.
Oh wow, wow.
Hmm.
And have you always had an interest in like mechanics and engines? Like, are you sort of a car guy?
Very much so a car guy. Yeah.
um, and is that so? I imagine if you went to college for that, if that was your first thought to pursue that kind of career, since you were a kid, were you interested in cars? Was it a way of bonding with your dad? What's the source of the interest in cars for you?
It's always been just an innate interest. Like my mom told me very young, like even when I was first speaking words, that I would, point out the window. I'm like, "Hey, look, a Corvette," and she was like, "How do you know what that is?" But it's always been an interest, and but I think the only reason I went to school for it is because you get out of high school and everybody's pressuring you, like, "What do you want to do the rest of your life?" When you're only 18, it's just you're like, I don't know. I like cars, so I guess I'll go to school for that. But
Mm.
yeah, it's hard to put much thought into it when you're that young.
And what is it about cars? I mean, do you like? I imagine there are people who like just like the shapes, like the aerodynamics and how the light bounces off the shell of the car. Some people are more like gearheads, where they take an interest to the engine. What aspects of or is it the lifestyle? What aspects of the car do you even appreciate or enjoy the most?
I have a big appreciation for the engineering of a car. Like I've told people you can find appreciation even with a Honda Civic. That how many man hours went into designing every little piece of that, and they can somehow make it last for how many decades, which is pretty impressive. But
So you didn't study photography at all. I mean, did you take a course, or how is it that you're now doing this? Was it a sort of a grassroots self-made education in terms of photography?
definitely, my only formal education, I guess, would be I took freshman year in high school. We had a dark room, and I took
Oh
a
wow.
it was a film developing class. That was way back, I don't know, 2002. But everything I've learned since then has pretty much just been YouTube, just watching YouTube tutorials and all that kind of self taught.
So would you say that your interest in photography started freshman year?
Yeah, I guess it did. It kind of plateaued right after that. I didn't really have a camera for many years. Yeah, I didn't. I never really had an intention to do it professionally up until maybe 3 years ago.
Wow, no kidding. Is that what you're doing for work now, or is it just this awesome hobby that you have?
I would say it's a mixture of a hobby and a side hustle.
Mm.
I do kind of odd jobs on the side. I do weddings every now and then, interior shots, architecture.
Mm.
Kind of whoever calls me and asks for a job, I kind of just do it on the side.
Mm.
But it's
I
mostly for
wonder.
fun.
I was looking at your Romanian Light, the website, and just your the photos you have on your Instagram. And I was
Hmm.
wondering. I mean, you have photos of animals and architecture. You have night shots and portraits. I wonder, does the things you choose to take photos of, does does photography presuppose other interests, because you're obviously making these choices of what to shoot? Does that presuppose an interest in those things?
Um, Not really. I think the reason I have like such a variety is I like the challenge of learning how to take pictures of all those different subjects, because every
Mm.
genre of photography has, it requires a bit of knowledge and know how to do it. And I like the challenge of trying to learn how to, you know, take pictures of different subjects. Like the protests recently, this was my first dive into kind of photojournalism.
Oh wow. Okay.
So yeah.
And you said that, so you said in the past 3 years you've really like taken this interest, like you've gone like zero to 60 with this interest in the past like 3 years or so. I imagine that that's not that long to be a photographer. If I could imagine a photographer, being a photographer for 20 years, uh, do you ever feel insecure about your photography? Like I do podcasts and I skateboard and I do music, and as a creator, I just feel insecure sometimes because I always know that there are people that are just 1,000 times better. And do you ever have those insecure feelings with your photography?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think that's everybody has that, and I also kind of think it's necessary to for the drive to make yourself better. But yeah, I mean it's hard being on Instagram and seeing these these people with millions of followers and they're world travelers and yeah, it's definitely a thing.
Do you think that's a problem? Like, in the sense that for anything nowadays, I mean, we all have social media, we all have access to technology and cameras and musical equipment, and is it a bad thing that, let's just say, for lack of better words, that the market is just so oversaturated with content?
Yes and no. It does make things more difficult as a photographer. Like you see, you I mean it's a thing with like national parks. You see millions of pictures of the same angle. Everybody goes to the same lookout, and it. But I get that, and it kind of drives you to find try to see things in a different light. Everybody takes the same picture. I want to like climb down the side of the cliff and try to get the different angle that nobody else
Hmm.
has, and that could apply to all different types of create art content creation. So
What motivates you to take photos of things that people have already shot before, perhaps to perfection? What motivates you to take those photos?
I think it actually coincidentally I was out last night and there was a full moon rise behind Mount Hood. Yeah, and like I said, if there's like millions of pictures of Mount Hood, it takes doing that research, or like if the weather conditions are a certain way, it's having the right opportunity to get a picture that looks different than just a picture of the mountain with a clear blue sky. It's having something a little bit unique.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder too, like the reason for taking the photo in the first place. So, I'm sort of getting at an angle that the photography is supposed to do something for you, like make you money, or but I wonder if maybe you can tell me if this is how you feel. If taking the photo is just worth it for doing it, just to have the photo. Who cares if it's been done 1,000 times? It's worth doing just to do. Is that your feeling with when you take some of these photos, that it's just worth it in it and of itself?
Yeah, for sure. It's I mean, there's just the act of being out in nature too, which is good for you. But I print my own stuff too. I have hanging on my wall, and there's a couple pictures that kind of mean have sentimental value to just me because I know I remember that day and like things that I experienced. So I have a giant print of Mount Hood, like snowy picture in my living room that I did a long hike, on Thanksgiving,
Wow.
and it just was a very kind of like a success picture to me that I completed the hike while it was all snowy and everything. So yeah, it's definitely a fulfilling thing.
Wow, that's
Personally.
interesting. That's really interesting you say that because, nobody could ever know what it took. Well, I guess another photographer who's done a similar hike could know, but just to the average person, they may not know what it took to get that photo. So yeah, it's like a great, beautiful photo and it's perfect in focus and whatever, what have you. You know, it's always going to mean so much more to you as the photographer because you have all the memories of what it took to get that photo. And in that sense, it's really interesting because there's so much meaning and value in the photo itself. So it's just interesting to me, that layer of significance aside from just the photo itself. And I wonder if people lose sight of that. So, it's easy for me to say, oh, well, 1,000 people have taken that photo, but yeah, maybe, but that shouldn't devalue what it took to get the photo and your experience. So it's kind of cool that you can look at a photo that you've taken and be taken back to that moment of your life.
Yeah.
It's a day in your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even if it was a picture that looks like everybody else's picture, it's a picture that you took, and it's a memory of you know what it took to get that picture. And I think taking pictures yourself always means more than buying other people's
Mm,
pictures, I guess, or like I don't know. Yeah, it's just I think that's how I look at it. But
mm. So in terms of other events or events in general that you've done, have you ever shot a wedding before?
yeah, I've done a handful of weddings. Yeah.
And so the first wedding you've ever done, did you make any mistakes? I imagine doing something for the first time will lend itself to making mistakes. Did you make any mistakes the first wedding that you shot?
So the first wedding I shot was actually the one I talked about in Mexico when we were on the
Oh,
yacht.
okay.
It was,
Oh,
yeah, I
wow.
was shooting for friends. I did mess up a little bit, but luckily I was teamed up with another photographer friend who is quite experienced in it. So I was kind of her
Mm.
sidekick. So she kind of helped me out and everything. Um, but yeah, I mean,
I
you're gonna mess up doing things the first time, guaranteed.
and I would think that a wedding, for example, is there are so many pieces to a wedding, like the bride getting makeup put on her, and the bridesmaids getting their hair done, and there are just all these steps that go into a wedding, from the moment the people wake up to the moment they go to sleep, and all those events in between. I mean, as a photographer at a wedding, did you have to sort of research these parts of a wedding, or were you kind of just noticing on the fly what was important?
Yeah, you kind of have an eye of like special moments, like getting ready for the whole wedding the whole day. It's kind of just, being a fly on the wall and kind of trying to be invisible so people have those organic moments and you just kind of try to capture them in that way.
You said you've shot a handful of weddings. I At my wedding, I was concerned, not concerned, but how could I say this? I wanted to make sure the photographers like ate. Like, I didn't know if anybody was taking care of them. Were they being offered? Did you have you? What's your experience? Do you assume that you're going to eat at the wedding as a photographer? Do you wait to be offered? How does that negotiation work? Like, at the day of, I assume you ate at the wedding.
Yeah. I've always been fed every wedding I go to, but I never assume that'll be the case. I usually bring snacks and everything. But yeah, every wedding I've been to, they'll be like, "All right, you can put the camera down for half an hour. Here's some food," and so it's been a good experience like that.
So you shot weddings. I've seen that you've shot a lot of portraits too. Why do people care about portraits so much, in your opinion? For instance, if I have a portrait done of me, my brain fires off and I just have this pleasure of looking at the photo. And I think other people do too. It's like, I don't know what it does for them. Why do you think portraits are significant just in general?
I mean, and so as a photographer, you kind of learn how to pose people and get the right facial expression out of them. And the camera produces a really good looking image, and it's people seeing themselves in a way that they don't normally see themselves. It's not the same as a selfie or, just a candid shot. It's kind of seeing you in perfect form. It's, the skin's smoothed out. It's a very good edited image. So yeah, I think that's why people like that. I mean, I get hired a lot for people wanting dating profile pictures. People will hire me for that. So.
Oh wow, no kidding. That is interesting.
Yeah.
Wow, and I like that phrase you said. It's sort of you. Yeah, that's such a good point where you said it's you in your perfect form. And that's interesting because I do look at a couple photos of myself, and like, nice photos that my friend took with a nice camera. And it's like, wow, that maybe is the best that I've looked, and that is sort of that, it's different than that typical experience of just looking in the mirror every day. Some days we're happier with ourselves than others, but we can always look back on some portrait that captured the perfect moment. And like you said, how just the editing and how things are smoothed out. Yeah, I think that is really interesting. And now that you say it, it's funny that people will hire a photographer for a dating profile image, and for obvious reasons, I guess, so they can look as good as they possibly can for, potential suitors. So you took your own portrait, I think, right? For your Instagram profile photo.
Yes. Yeah, I did.
And I assume that's just like, on a timer and like autofocus.
Yeah. Well, it had to do manual because you can't. It's hard. It was very trial and error. Focusing on the right point because you can't autofocus when you're behind the camera on somebody. So it was actually quite the process to get that picture.
Well, because if you stand, just an inch forward or an inch back, does the focus it loses focus, right? If it's manual?
Yeah. There was probably only a couple inches of the focus plane of what's in focus. So you kind of I had a point where I was standing, I had a piece of tape on the floor, just like always stand on that. So I knew I was at the right, spot and all the lighting. And it was a process. I was bored one day and just did it.
So when you take a portrait of somebody, do you take, 50 photos and you just pick the best one?
So the way I usually do it is I'll work with people for about an hour and get 200 to 300 pictures. And I guess statistically, 10% of pictures usually turn out of what you take. So like 30 of those will be good. But I usually just send them all to the client and they send back the ones they like, and then I'll edit those. I've in the past I used to pick myself, but then people would want the other ones too. So
yeah. And I just have to wonder, I recently, for example, I was interviewing somebody, this girl who wrote her first book, and she was on the younger side. She was a younger person. And she sent me a few photos because I like to post a portrait of the person with like the announcement of the interview. And she sent me a few photos, and in a couple of them, she looked really anxious or insecure, I would say. Do you have that experience of looking at the photos from the day? So if you do a portrait for somebody and you have 100 photos to look at, are you sort of, I know, obviously you're not going to sit there and, analyze each photo, but do you ever notice like the expression on some of the, quote unquote outtakes where it's like, oh, they feel uncomfortable here. Are you ever noticing the expressions in the photos you're taking other than the perfect photo?
Yeah, that's something you need to focus. I mean, when you're doing portrait photography, knowing how to work the camera is not even the main focus. It's about posing people and actually making them feel comfortable, because a lot of people are not comfortable in front of a camera. It's about, you got to be telling jokes, making them laugh, kind of break those walls down, because most people that hire me when they're for portraits, the first picture is always them just sitting there kind of timid, and you got to like kind of make them forget that the camera's there, kind of be talking to them. And it's all when you look in the eyes too. You can always, the eyes, they say, window to the soul and all that. You can kind of tell what people are thinking based on their facial expressions.
Wow. So do you expect like the first 10 photos to go in the garbage almost? You kind of know that you're warming them up a little bit. You're trying to feel them out and, like you said, tell a joke or two, get them to feel comfortable. Obviously you don't assume this, but do you almost assume that the first 10, 15 photos aren't going to be the one?
I don't really think like that. I usually, when it is somebody who's uncomfortable versus like an actual model, I'll put the camera on silent so they don't know that I'm taking pictures sometimes. Because when you hear like the clicking sound, or just like, oh, you just took a picture, like how did I look? So yeah, the silent mode kind of allows you to get more of those moments where because I don't know, if people try to be ready for a picture, it means they look awkward, and but
Right.
yeah, there's a lot of tricks you use to get the right photo.
Yeah, it reminds me of this. It's probably a very famous instance, but I must have seen an article or something of this photographer. It was a series, I think, that this photographer did where they would take a photo of the person and then they would tell the person they're beautiful and then take a photo. So basically it was a series of two photos per person. So the first photo, presumably is the person being guarded and, I don't know the circumstances, but so they take a photo and then they tell the person they're beautiful and then they take another photo immediately after. So that basically it's a contrast of discomfort, to feeling beautiful. And it was really just a beautiful series. It kind of hits the point that we're talking about. And so it's kind of funny as a photographer, you're sort of, you have this, I wouldn't call it an obligation really, but you're in a way it's a part of your job. It's an unwritten part of the job to sort of make the person feel comfortable and, feel good about themselves to get the photo. So I appreciate that the process that you just talked about. So we can move on now. I'm curious because you live in Portland, and I know that there have been protests for the past, I think, more than 50 days by now, but they call Portland and Oregon like the whitest state, and I know that it has some racist history. Are there any remnants to you that show a racist past of Oregon or Portland? Do you notice that in the city at all?
I mean, you definitely notice how white it is here. It's that's right up front. As much as I hate to say this, like I don't have a racist bone in my body, but sometimes when you do see someone of color, it kind of stands out to you more because it's more rare to see that, because so
Wow.
many people are white here. It's a very weird thing. Like, I grew up in Michigan near Detroit, which is a lot more diverse. So that's what I was used to, but it's definitely, yeah. And I mean, for sure a result of the racist history of this state.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we need to
Wow.
go into what happened with all that, but yeah.
And what's the mood like in Portland right now? I mean, my God, over 50 days of protests every night. Some of them peaceful, some of them not. Obviously, we've seen the photos, and it's on the news. What's the mood like in general? Is it basically business as usual, or are you noticing a different mood in the city?
The mood that I'm noticing different is a lot on social media. I mean, the mainstream media is really throwing this in a I don't know, how do I put this? Is things aren't as bad here as the mainstream media is writing
Mm,
about, because all the
okay.
protests are happening within 4 blocks downtown, and if you don't want to be a part of it, you don't even notice it, because
Oh,
it's
wow.
very contained down there. It's not as Trump has put it, that Portland's going to burn to the ground if he doesn't send troops here. That's not the way it is, and I mean, and a lot of people I know are choosing to not engage with it, and it's
Mm.
very easy to, the only indication anything's going on are news helicopters flying around, a lot more than usual. But
Wow. So you could ignore it
yeah,
basically if you wanted to.
oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I live. It's probably a 10-minute drive from downtown where the protests are happening, and yeah, all I hear is like the occasional helicopter at night, and yeah, you don't really hear anything else.
Yeah. So you recently, and basically why I reached out to you, I've been wanting to talk to somebody who has just been around just to see, because yeah, like you said, there's this difference in how the media is portraying what's going on compared to what's really going on. So I've been trying to find somebody who has seen at least a little bit of it. Um, what what have you seen? I presume you've been down there at least once, just because you took some photos that I've seen. What was your experience like? What have you seen down there?
Yeah, so that's actually the reason I went down, is because I kept reading news articles, and then I would see in the comments people saying like, "No, this isn't right. You shouldn't have written it this way." So I went down there to kind of just see for myself what was actually happening. And the first night I went down, it was early in the night, and I went down maybe 8 p.m. and I left around 11. And that
Wow.
whole first experience was nothing but you know, powerful speeches on human rights, like kumbaya, everybody's singing, chanting, there's drum circles. And I'm like, what the hell? Where's all the violence? So I went home, and then I woke up the next day with, an article on my phone saying, the feds were tear gassing people and there was all this violence. And I'm like, what the hell happened? So it was actually, that's the second time I went down at 11 the next day,
Oh, okay. So it
at
pops off
night.
later on.
Usually around 10, 11 o'clock has been the turning point of when starts getting out of hand. And yeah, I went down the next night to see that firsthand, and
Wow.
it was a war zone, to say the least. But it's since calmed down since the feds have stand down, because they were really escalating things. But
Did you
yeah,
have
it
any
was.
like protective gear at all? I mean, did you have like how do you prepare? Because you actively went out there a little later knowing the risk. I mean, what preparation did you do?
So I'll fully admit I was an idiot that first night I went out. I had nothing but my cloth mask on, and I have pictures. They were firing tear gas off, rubber bullets, everything, and I was literally holding my camera up to my
Wow.
face as literal eye protection. Like I was like, if I pull my camera down, I'm completely exposed. So it was, in hindsight, I was pretty stupid, but I'd since bought eye protection and earplugs and everything going out there.
So you went. So for lack of better words, you saw some action,
Yeah, I
and I
was
mean,
definitely right.
and to get these photos, I mean, how close are you? Are you? as a you're documenting it, are you trying to stand to the side? Are you trying to get up close? What was your thinking? You're probably doing it on the fly, but how did it work out? How close were you getting? Were you behind the crowds? Yeah. Tell me about your physical, geography in relations to, the heavy action.
So I was pretty much like right in the middle of it. So some of the pictures I got of the police like walking through the tear gas, I was probably only, 15, 20 yards away from them. I had kind of a lens that zoomed in, but yeah, I was trying to get up close, and it was kind of a, kind of a little game. I'm like, I don't know how close I should get. I don't know if they're just going to like come out and start beating me, as they were doing to other journalists. So it was definitely a little game there. I didn't know how close to get, but yeah.
So you didn't feel particularly safe just because you had a camera? Because I think that's an assumption people make sometimes, like, oh, well, hey, I'm not involved in the protest. I'm just documenting it. And people, I think, they think that's a shield. Did you get that sense at all, that you were a little safer just because you had a camera? Or did you feel like you were just as vulnerable as the person on the front line protesting?
Yeah, I didn't feel like I had I had a little thing that said press, but I didn't feel like that gave me a shield at all, because I had read that, they were being violent towards, it didn't matter who you were, that the feds and the police were showing violence towards people. Even like last week, there's a guy that's been down there with a trumpet who's just walking around playing the trumpet, and he got hit with a rubber bullet. It's like, you don't have to be like a violent protester or a rioter to get this kind of treatment. So.
And did you see, I want to say you had a photo of the wall of moms. Did you get to see that firsthand?
I did. Yeah. Yeah. I've captured them a couple times now.
And what's like the mood like at that, because that just adds this layer to it where, it's like, my God, now mothers are getting involved and putting themselves on the line. Is what, I guess what did it feel like to be there and to witness that?
It was powerful. It was definitely an eye-opening moment, not just for me, but I think for a lot of people, showing that moms had the courage to get out there because their kids were in danger. So I think it was definitely a play in getting the feds to stand down here.
Wow.
Sure.
You took a photo of a cop or some agent. They had a helmet on, and it's interesting because it looks like a woman, but the subject is looking directly at the camera. Do you know what photo I'm referring to that you took?
I do. Yeah. Yeah.
And so to me, just as an observer, I'm looking at this photo, and the cop, and so it's interesting because it goes back to our discussion on portraits. It's a portrait in a way. And it's very interesting to sort of analyze the expression on the subject's face. They appear to be hyper vigilant. They look anxious. They look almost a little scared. They don't know what's about to happen. Tell me about that photo. Did you know, the value in that photo the moment you took it, or was it, when you went back home and looked at the photos that you're like, wow, this is powerful? Just tell me about that photo in general.
First off, I love that you brought this up because that's my favorite picture I've taken of this thus far. And exactly what you said. You see their eyes. You see that they do look a little scared, unsure, and I didn't even know that I had gotten that picture until I got home and blew that up on the computer, and it kind of like gave me chills. That they're looking right at me and pointing I think it was a paintball gun or something with the pepper bullets in it or something. They're pointing it right at me.
Wow.
But yeah, it's kind of a weird thing because all the negative feelings towards police now, but that picture you can really it kind of humanizes that individual. You see And I don't think that's something I could post online and talk about right now. It would fall under the whole Blue Lives Matter thing.
Right.
But I don't know. It definitely makes me feel that they're just doing their job, and they're not so sure about what they're doing either. And it's a very powerful image for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And yeah, that it's unfortunate that we would have to, sort of tread on ice with what we're saying. But I absolutely agree that, that a photo like that, it totally humanizes them, because they are all just people. What really sucks about this situation is that it sucks that it is cops versus the community, for lack of better terms, because we're all just people. We're all victim to society. It's where they chose their path and we chose ours. But we're all people. We all have families to go home to. We're all trying to make a living, and that's the way they're doing it. And does that excuse the behavior of some of these people? No, it doesn't. But the point is that they're people just like us, and it sucks that we're sort of in this cage. We're like rats in a cage, just fighting it out, when it's like, well, we should really be targeting the larger system as opposed to the pawns in the game. It's like pawn versus pawn, and we don't realize that, when we should really be thinking on a higher level. So that photo, I thought, as soon as I saw that, I was like, wow. I almost got chills. Like the person's just looking directly into the lens. Like it looks like a woman to me, but she looks like she knew you were taking the photo. How close were you to that person?
It was probably 20 feet, maybe 25 feet. It wasn't too far back. Yeah.
And there was some photo that I think it was a black and white photo, and it's a photo of some building, and there's a lot of spray painted stuff on it. And there was some sign, which I can't remember what it says now, but I want to say the caption read something like this, that people are more important than property. And that was your caption that you wrote for that photo, I think. What does that mean to you? What does that mean to you?
So that was just my 2 cents putting in, because a lot of people had the argument of why the feds and the police were using the brutality they were, is because I don't want to say we, but there was protesters that were attacking the federal courthouse, and people were using that as justification, like, oh, they deserve what they get. And in my eye, the punishment doesn't really equate to the crime. I'm like, yeah, you're defacing federal property, but does that warrant bloodshed? To, like, literally, people have been bleeding on the streets because they're defending this courthouse, and that was just my little jab back at that. I'm like, I don't think any piece of property is worth making people bleed.
And in terms of all of you obviously made the decision to go down there and to photograph this stuff, and I say this, how can I say, this isn't supposed to be like a sharp question or anything, because I ask this to myself, but why do you care? Why do you care about what's going on, and why would you even go down there at all?
I support this whole Black Lives Matter movement and everything about it. It's almost infuriating, the stories you hear of the mistreatment people of color have received from the police. And I want to capture it in a way that kind of adds more steam to this movement. I want to not, because like I said, when we go back to the mainstream media, it's hard to get a full grasp of what's happening here, not just here, but across the whole country. There's protests going on. And I felt like I have the resources to capture it in a powerful, emotional way that makes people realize, like, oh, we're all just people trying to find our way, and we all have rights.
So why document it in the first place? What's the value of taking these photos that you're taking?
It's like I said, I want to, because a lot of people, are scared to go down there. That, that it's, either you don't have eye protection, or like you don't want to be in harm's way. And I want to give a firsthand experience to people that aren't going down there, to show the raw power and emotion of that. It's a powerful experience to go in there, and I want to convey that to people the best I can.
Rob, Harrold, I have one more question for you. I appreciate your time and your insight on this. I do happen to believe that it's very important to document these things. I talked to somebody before who said we were just talking about the civil rights movement of the '60s, and how would we reflect on that time period without photos and without the interviews and without the documentation? So it is important work that you're doing. And I hope that, and I'm trying to play my part too by reaching out to people like you, just so there's stuff on the record that we can reflect on, and that people who can't go down there can see what's going on by virtue of being in the seat of their own home. So it is important what you're doing, and I appreciate your insight. You can answer this last question any way you like. Rob Harrold, who the hell are you?
Oh, that's a deep one, right? I got to think about that. As a person, I am someone who likes to capture, as a photographer, I guess I'm someone that just likes capturing life moments in a way. And as a person, I like to share my experiences with people, and that's why I guess I love photography so much. I don't know, I'm here in life to experience things and maybe show people who aren't experiencing as much, and it's a sharing thing. And I guess that's my answer to it. But